AIDS activist Larry Kramer has been rocking the boat for a couple of dozen years now in any number of ways. Think what you will of him, he is not afraid to speak his mind. It's a courage forged out of sheer necessity.
I grew up being called sissy by my father. The most hated word in the English language to me when he called me a sissy. I just wanted to crawl up and die. And I guess somewhere along the line, I learned how I wasn't going to be a sissy anymore.
There are many things you can call Larry Kramer, but sissy certainly is not one of them. Instead, try screenwriter, novelist, playwright, and fighter.
HIV infections are up as much as 40%. You cannot continue to allow yourselves and each other to act and live like this.
We are enduring an epidemic of death.
Whether at the podium or on the stage, as in his groundbreaking play, The Normal Heart, Larry Kramer, who turned 71 today, traffics heavily in one emotion.
You want my patients? Here, take them.
Anger.
Take them. Just do something for them.
It's your autobiography.
Part of it, yes.
Because as the play begins, and it's almost hard to comprehend that 20 or so years ago, people were in denial.
They still are.
Fight back! Fight AIDS!
As a founding member of the protest group ACT UP, Kramer has battled ignorance and hostility from gays and straights alike. And yet, even at this late date, with the worldwide AIDS death toll at more than 25 million, Kramer says he's still fighting against the toughest foe of all, indifference.
It breaks my heart that we went through all of this and that so many of us have died and that we fought so hard, ACT UP, to get the drugs out there that are now out there to save people, and that people are still infecting themselves.
Flashback to 1981. For gays, the closet door was slowly opening, and many took to the streets to celebrate. Coming out was becoming acceptable. So when the first news accounts appeared describing a so-called gay cancer, there was fear of the disease coupled with fear of its repercussions across society.
At the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, a special task force is studying the disease. Officials say more than 400 cases have been reported, now escalating to 15 or 20 new cases a week. And most frightening, the possibility that the virus can be transmitted from person to person, virtually, a contagious form of cancer.
I was very concerned about causing panic because we didn't have our civil rights.
Lawrence Mass was one of the first doctors to foresee the coming epidemic and the anti-gay backlash it would inspire.
You would hear people talking about putting us in concentration camps, and one of them spoke coolly and calmly about having us all gassed.
At the time, Larry Kramer was riding high on his success as an Oscar-nominated screenwriter. He was enjoying a comfortable and private life. But AIDS changed all that.
You have no idea what it was like. You could not walk down the street without running into somebody who was sick, who told you about 3 people who had died since the last time you saw him.
So in 1981, Kramer and a handful of friends established Gay Men's Health Crisis to provide services for people with AIDS. This private man began waging a very public fight.
There are more lives claimed, victims claimed, than toxic shock and Legionnaire's disease combined. And yet most of the country doesn't know about this cancer.
Why?
Well, I think it's because it's a gay cancer.
Indeed, it took years for President Ronald Reagan to publicly discuss AIDS, and even then, the message was cold comfort to many.
But let's be honest with ourselves. AIDS information cannot be what some call value neutral. After all, when it comes to preventing AIDS, don't medicine and morality teach the same lessons?
In response, Larry Kramer took AIDS awareness to an entirely new level. ACT UP, the AIDS coalition to unleash power, disrupted public events, even breaking into the set of the CBS Evening News.
We're going to take a break for a commercial just now.
Do you have any regrets whatsoever about the activities of ACT UP, about
None.
interrupting church services or... jumping in front of Dan Rather or...
No, certainly not that.
We'd kind of laugh about it now, but at the time...
No, I'm about as proud of ACT UP as anything I've ever done. Disrupting the Mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral is what made us powerful. That one action gave us power. Suddenly, people were afraid of us. We were no longer the limp-wristed faggot stereotypes. It was a bunch of guys in leather boots and jeans and butch beyond belief who were out there. These were not the gay people that the media was used to portraying.
Kramer let no one off the hook. Among his favorite targets, Dr. Anthony Fauci, who was the government's #1 AIDS doctor.
I was the face, I was the name there, so-called, representing the federal government, and he wanted to shake the federal government, so he used a tactic which was classic Larry, and it works.
I can't imagine, even though, as you well know, I'm very sympathetic towards activist-type tactics, that I think this has to be labeled as not very productive.
And some of us, when he got our attention, we started to look at the principles of what he was trying to get across, and they were sound principles.
The medicines Kramer fought for have saved the lives of millions of men and women who are HIV positive, including Kramer himself. But that's been only half the battle. For years, Kramer has called on the gay community to stop behaviors which can spread HIV. The result, he's been accused of blaming the victim.
There was an era there where I was a pariah. It was like being in the wilderness. And people would cross the street rather than walk on the same side of the street with me.
Even so, unprotected sex is once again on the rise in America, and researchers fear a subsequent rise in HIV transmission.
We have everything required to save the world, except the will to do it.
Worldwide, more than 65 million people have been infected with HIV since 1981. And in much of the developing world, its spread continues to go unchecked. So Larry Kramer goes on fighting, undefeated by HIV, unbowed by opposition, and unwilling to retire. It seems he just won't quit.
It's hard getting up in front of people making an ass of yourself. But, you know, you got to think of the greater good.
So you almost said it.
What?
As tough as you seem to be, from those of us watching from the outside, and as angry as you were, was also a lonely fight.
It's always a lonely fight. Life is lonely.
But what a way to live. People.
It's a great way to live.
Yeah?
Why? You can wake up in the morning and say, I wasn't a phony, I wasn't scared, I fought the fight.